Every war you know started on Earth, but the first one, the one that truly matters, began in a place of perfect light. It started with a flash, not of an explosion, but of a revelation. The silent, peaceful cosmos was suddenly a battlefield. Picture this, silhouetted against the impossible glare, two figures. One, a being of such pure radiance it hurt to imagine. The other, a growing shadow, a void that seemed to pull the light into itself, twisting it into something else. Have you ever seen a shadow that had a will of its own? Around them, legions of light clashed, not with steel, but with something far more powerful. Will and fire. It was a civil war on a cosmic scale, a conflict born from a single corrosive thought: pride. Then, a cry thundered through eternity, a challenge that became a name. Who is like God? In the ancient language, this very question, Michael, became the battle cry of heaven. In that instant, the rebellion shattered. The shadow and its followers were broken, their brilliance extinguished. They were cast out, falling like a shower of lightning from a home they could never reclaim. But this fall wasn't the end of their story. It was the beginning of ours, because their new kingdom would be built in the one place they could still wage their war: the shadows of the human heart. Before the first clock ticked, before the first atom was spun into existence, there was a silence. But not an empty silence, not the cold, dead vacuum we imagine in the void of space. Picture instead a silence that was full, a quiet so profound it was a presence. It was the stillness of absolute potential, the calm before the thunder of reality itself. There was no where, for there was no space. There was no when, for time had not yet been born. There was only is a single, infinite, uncaused reality. Not a thing, but the very principle of being itself. How do you describe something that has no beginning, no end, no form, and no limits? You don't. You feel it. A boundless ocean of pure consciousness, aware of its own limitless existence. This is the uncreated, the source from which all things that are created would one day flow. While our universe would be born in fire and fury, this primordial state was one of perfect, unshakable peace. It was not a being in the sense that you and I are beings, finite, contained, and dependent. It was being, the verb, not the noun, the I am, that echoed in the non-space before echoes were possible. For millennia, thinkers have tried to name it: the unmoved mover, the first cause, God. But a name is a handle, a way to grab onto something. And this could not be held. It could only be. But the deepest mystery of this infinite reality wasn't its power or its scale. It was that it wasn't alone. Here is where the human mind begins to fray at the edges, where logic gives way to awe. This singular, infinite being existed in a state of perfect internal community. It is a concept that can short-circuit the brain, but it's the bedrock of everything that is to come. This is the Holy Trinity. It isn't a committee. It isn't three gods. It is one God, one what, in three whos. Picture this. The first who is the Father, the source of it all, the unoriginate origin. Think of the Father not as an old man in the sky, but as a boundless wellspring of life and love, eternally overflowing. He is the anchor of reality, the silent, loving ground from which all divinity springs. His very nature is to give himself away completely, to pour himself out. In this eternal act of self-knowledge and self-giving, the Father beholds himself. And this image, this perfect reflection of who he is so complete, so total, that the reflection is itself a distinct person. This is the Son, the Logos, the Word. He is not created like a painting is made by a painter. He is eternally begotten, like a thought is generated by a mind. You cannot separate the thinker from their thought, nor the Father from his word. The ancient Greek term logos doesn't just mean word, it means the divine reason, the logic, the pattern that underpins the entire cosmos. The Son is the perfect expression of the Father, the divine idea made manifest, the song that the singer has always been singing. He is the visibility of the invisible, the beauty of the source, and the love between them. The love between the Father who gives all and the Son who receives all and gives it back. This love is so real, so powerful, so intensely alive that it too is a distinct person. This is the Holy Spirit, the breath of God, the bond of unity. If the Father is the lover and the Son is the beloved, the Holy Spirit is the love itself. He is the dynamic motion, the fire, the current that flows between them in an endless, joyful exchange. He is not a force or an it. He is the us of God. He proceeds from the Father and the Son, a sigh of perfect contentment, a rush of infinite joy that completes the divine circle. So, within the one God, there is a perfect dance. A symphony of three persons in one being, each eternally pouring themselves into the others. There is no rivalry, no ego, no loneliness. The Father glorifies the Son glorifies the Father, and the Spirit is the glory that flows between them. It's a relationship of such perfect harmony and selfless love that it is itself the very definition of heaven. Have you ever felt a moment of pure, selfless connection with another person where you felt completely seen and understood? Theologians say that feeling is a tiny echo, a single stray photon, of the uncreated light that is the inner life of God. This is the pre-cosmic order, an eternal, stable and yet dynamic reality of perfect love. From this state of utter fullness, a thought arises, not a thought born of need or boredom or lack. God needs nothing. This thought is born of superabundance. It is the artist, overflowing with beauty, who simply must paint. It is the musician, full of a melody, who simply must sing. The thought is this: let us make others, beings who can share in this joy, beings who can receive this love and, in their own unique way, love in return. The divine life, already infinitely rich, willed to become even richer through the free love of creatures who were not God. It was a staggering, audacious idea. An act of pure, unadulterated generosity. The first creation wouldn't be of rock and water and fire. It would be of thought and will and light. Before the first star was kindled, there was a blueprint, a divine architecture for a different kind of reality, a realm of pure spirit. This was the plan for the angelic hierarchies. Imagine a great mind, the mind of God, conceiving not of structures made of matter, but of structures made of consciousness, schematics for souls, a cascade of being flowing directly from the divine throne, each order designed for a specific purpose, a specific way of reflecting God's glory. This wasn't a rigid military command structure, but more like a living ecosystem of light and praise, a great chain of love and service, linking the uncreated to the creation that was to come. At the very pinnacle, closest to the unbearable fire of the divine presence, were the seraphim. Their name means the burning ones. They weren't conceived as messengers, but as beings of pure love. Their entire existence was to burn with an all-consuming adoration for God, absorbing and reflecting His love like an infinite prism. Just below them, the cherubim, whose name implies fullness of knowledge. They were designed to contemplate the divine wisdom, to understand the deep secrets of God's plan. They are the guardians of holy mysteries, the living libraries of divine truth. And then the thrones, who were not beings who sat on thrones, but were the very thrones of God themselves, perfect symbols of divine justice and stability, through whom God's judgment and order would flow into the cosmos. This cascade of purpose continued downward. The dominions, tasked with governing the lower orders of angels, translating the high commands of God into actionable tasks. The virtues, whose role it was to maintain the fabric of the natural universe that was yet to be, the conduits of the power that would make stars burn and planets spin. The powers, the warrior angels, holding the line against cosmic evil and chaos. Many of these names and orders come from the writings of a 5th century Christian mystic known as Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite, whose work became the foundational text for angelology in the West. His vision was of a universe utterly saturated with God's presence, administered by these spiritual beings, and finally the last 3 choirs, the ones whose work would most directly touch the human story. The principalities, guardians of nations and cities, the archangels, the great messengers carrying the most crucial declarations from God to His creation. Think of Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, the chief executives of the divine will. And last, the countless multitude of angels themselves, the rank and file, each with a mission, many destined to become personal guardians for the fragile, Material beings who were still just a glimmer in the mind of God. Can you imagine it? A society built not on scarcity and competition, but on the joyful transmission of love and light from one to another. Their purpose was glorious, to be the first audience of the symphony of creation, to be the mirrors in which God's beauty could be reflected in a billion different ways, to serve Him, not as slaves but as beloved collaborators, participating in His great project. They were to be the bridge between the eternal and the temporal, the spiritual and the material. They were the firstborn of creation, beings of immense power, intellect and beauty, saturated in the immediate presence of their Creator. The design was perfect. The harmony was absolute. The uncreated light had conceived of a new way to share itself, a family of pure spirits, living in an unbreakable orbit of love around their source. The stage was set for a drama of cosmic proportions, an eternity of shared glory. But even in a design so flawless, a single terrible possibility lay dormant, like a shadow coiled within the light. What if a being made to be a perfect mirror chose to reflect only itself? Before time had a name, before the first star ignited the velvet black, there was a thought. Not a human thought, fleeting and chaotic, but a divine intention. An idea of such staggering brilliance that it would become the blueprint for perfection itself. Picture this. In the silent, unwritten cosmos, a singular masterpiece is being conceived. A being forged not from dust or clay, but from the very essence of light and sound. The first brushstroke on an empty canvas. The first note in an eternal symphony. This was not just a creation. It was the creation, the prototype, the firstborn of all that would ever be. His name, when it was finally spoken into existence, was not a curse. It was a promise. Lucifer, in the ancient tongue, it means light bearer, the morning star. He was designed to be the ultimate reflection of his Creator, a living prism that would take the infinite, unapproachable light of divinity and refract it into a billion colors for the rest of creation to behold. His very name was his job description, to carry the light, to announce the dawn. Is there any greater tragedy than a name that once meant hope becoming a synonym for despair? He was the original prodigy, the sum of all divine artistry, a being so magnificent that the concept of a flaw was a logical impossibility. To say he was beautiful is to use a word that shatters under the weight of the reality. Imagine every precious stone known to humanity, the diamond's fire, the sapphire's deep heart, the emerald's living green, all woven together not as decoration, but as his very substance. Ancient scriptures describe him as the seal of perfection, covered in a mosaic of gems, walking among stones of fire. This wasn't just a place. It was the very nucleus of reality, the engine room of the universe, and he moved through it as its warden. Theologians have interpreted these stones of fire not as literal rock, but as celestial bodies, nascent stars, or even the foundational energies of the cosmos itself. His wisdom was as breathtaking as his form. Think of the most complex mathematics, the most profound philosophy, the most moving poetry. For him, these were like breathing. He didn't just understand the mechanics of the universe. He understood the why. He could trace the trajectory of every atom and hear the silent music that held the galaxies in their celestial dance. His voice was not just sound, it was harmony. Embedded in his very being were pipes and strings, making him a walking orchestra whose every movement, every word, was a note in the unending worship of his Creator. He was the conductor of the heavenly choir, the first and loudest voice in a song of perpetual praise. But a beautiful voice can be used to sing any song, including one of its own making. Now try to imagine his position. It's one thing to be gifted, to be brilliant or beautiful. It's another to be placed at the center of all power. Lucifer was not some distant decorative angel. He was the anointed cherub. What does that even mean? In the hierarchy of heaven, the cherubim are not the chubby infants of Renaissance paintings. They are guardians, powerful, terrifying beings who stand as sentinels of the sacred, and he was their leader. His wings were said to cover the very throne of God. This isn't just about physical proximity. It's about intimacy. He was in the inner circle, the trusted confidant, the prime minister of the kingdom of heaven. He saw the face of God. He stood in the unfiltered glory that would vaporize any lesser being. He was the chief executive of the entire angelic host, responsible for executing the divine will throughout the cosmos. Every angel, every principality, every power answered to him. His authority was second only to the Creator himself. He was the steward of heaven, entrusted with its keys, its secrets, and its security. When you are given that much power, when you are that close to the ultimate source, could you ever mistake the reflected light for the source itself? And in all of this, in every facet of his being and his role, he was perfect. Blameless. It's a word we barely comprehend. We are born into a world of mistakes, of learning from failure, of character-building flaws. Our entire experience is defined by imperfection. But he wasn't. From the moment he was created, he was flawless. Not just morally, but functionally. He never had a wrong thought. He never made a miscalculation. He never felt a single flicker of envy, or pride, or resentment. His every action was in perfect alignment with the will of his Creator. His love was pure. His worship was genuine. His service was without fault. He was a perfect son, a perfect servant, a perfect leader. He was the living embodiment of divine order, a testament to what creation was supposed to be. He was grace made manifest, a being of such complete and utter integrity that the very idea of him turning, of him falling, was as unthinkable as the sun rising in the west. He was stable, he was secure, he was eternal, or so it seemed. Because perfection, it turns out, is not a destination. It is a choice repeated every moment, and free will is a gift that can be used to choose anything at all. So the Creator bestowed upon him gifts beyond measure, gifts that stagger the human imagination. He was given a beauty that would define the very concept for all eternity. He was granted a wisdom that plumbed the depths of cosmic mystery. He was handed an authority that commanded legions of celestial beings and spanned galaxies. He was placed in a position of honor so high that it could not be surpassed by any created thing. He was the vessel into which God poured the absolute best of his creative power. Every gift, every jewel, every iota of power was meant for one purpose: to be a mirror, to reflect the glory of the giver. He was the moon to God's sun, designed to illuminate the darkness with a borrowed light. But there was one final gift, the most precious and the most dangerous of all. It wasn't a jewel or a title. It was the gift of self-awareness, the gift of a sovereign will, the ability to look at his own reflection and form an opinion, the power to choose, the freedom to ask a question that had never before been asked in the history of existence, a question that would ignite a fire that would burn across all of time and space, a question that would begin with the two most dangerous words in any language: I will. Before there was a before light had a name and darkness had a shape, there was a silence. Not an empty silence, but a living, breathing stillness pregnant with potential. Imagine an artist's canvas, infinite and unstretched, holding every color that ever would be. In this unspace of pure possibility, the first thought of creation began to stir. It wasn't a sound, but a resonance. A hum that vibrated through the nothingness, weaving the first threads of existence. From this hum, the first beings were born. Angels, not flesh and bone, but creatures of pure concept, energy, and will. And among them one was magnificent. He was called Lucifer, the light bringer. Picture this: a being woven from the heart of a newborn star, a walking symphony whose every movement created music that could make galaxies weep. His wisdom was a fathomless ocean, his beauty a thing so sharp and perfect it could break your heart. He was the masterpiece, the first draft of perfection, seemingly flawless in every way. He was the morning star, and all of creation seemed to orbit his splendor, captivated by his light. But perfection often carries within it a seed of something else, something dangerously close to its opposite. As the symphony of Lucifer's existence echoed through the new cosmos, another thought took form. This one was different. It wasn't born of starlight and song. It was quieter, more deliberate. It was forged in the unblinking heart of divine purpose. If Lucifer was a radiant explosion, this new being was the focused point of a diamond, intended for a single unyielding task. This was not a creation of spectacle, but one of necessity, a response, an answer to a question that hadn't even been asked yet. He was brought into being not simply to be beautiful, but to be a standard, a living, breathing measure of truth against which all other things could be judged. His light was not the dazzling, self-reflecting glare of a supernova, but the steady, unwavering flame of a candle in the dark, a light that doesn't scream for attention, but simply is. A beacon. Have you ever noticed how the quietest people often have the strongest convictions? This was that principle given form and wings. He was the embodiment of loyalty, a concept so pure it was indestructible. He was given a name. And in the celestial realms, a name is not just a label. It is a destiny. It is the very essence of a being spoken into reality. His name was a question, a challenge, and a declaration all at once. 3 syllables that would one day shake the foundations of heaven and earth. Michael, Michael. In the original Hebrew, Michael isn't just a curious question. It's a rhetorical question, a defiant cry that means there is no one like God. It wasn't a question he was asking of others. It was the question he perpetually asked of himself. A constant reminder of his place, his purpose, his source. Think about that. His entire identity was wrapped up in deflecting glory from himself and pointing it back to the Creator. While other angels were named for their attributes, their wisdom, their strength, their beauty, his name was a banner of humility, a shield forged from the very concept of selfless devotion. And in a world that was about to become obsessed with the self, this shield would be needed more than anyone could possibly imagine. From this name, this core identity flowed his designated role. He was to be the protector, the guardian of the innocent, the shield of the divine throne. His primary function wasn't to create, but to preserve, to stand in the gap. Have you ever felt that instinct to stand between someone you love and a threat? To take the blow so they don't have to? That is the heart of Michael. It's a primal, selfless instinct woven into the fabric of his being. He is the cosmic embodiment of the first responder, the soldier on the wall, the secret service agent who steps into the path of the bullet. His existence is a vow: as long as I stand, you are safe. But his protection was not passive. He wasn't just a wall. He was also a weapon, the warrior, the prince of the heavenly host. He was given command over legions of angels, not to conquer or dominate, but to defend the divine order, to push back against the encroaching chaos that whispers at the edges of reality. His sword, when drawn, is not a tool of aggression, but a surgical instrument of justice meant to cut away the cancerous cells of pride and rebellion before they can metastasize. Here, the great contrast of heaven is laid bare. On one side, you have Lucifer, the morning star, a being of breathtaking splendor whose focus was increasingly turning inward. He was a mirror, reflecting his own magnificent light back onto himself, becoming enamored with his own perfection. His brilliance began to cast a shadow, the shadow of I. I am wise. I am beautiful. I am powerful. It was a subtle shift, a single note in the celestial choir that began to drift almost imperceptibly off-key. A vibration of self-love that threatened to become the dissonant chord of self-worship. On the other side, you have Michael, the archangel whose very name deflects praise. He is not a mirror, but a lens. His purpose is to gather the light of the divine and focus it, to magnify it, to project it outward in service to others. Where Lucifer's splendor demanded attention, Michael's strength commanded respect. Lucifer's power was in his charisma, his ability to draw all eyes to himself. Michael's power was in his character, his unshakable, unmovable center of gravity. Which is true strength? The light that demands to be seen or the light that simply serves? This fundamental difference is what set the stage for everything that was to come. As that dissonant note of pride from Lucifer grew louder, a choice had to be made by every being in the heavenly court. The harmony of creation was threatened. An ideology was spreading, a silent poison that suggested the creature could be equal to, or even greater than, the Creator. It was the birth of ego, and when a body is threatened by a poison, the immune system must respond. An army needs a general. Not the most decorated, not the most flamboyant, but the one who is most loyal to the mission, the one who will not break, the one who will not bend, the one whose will is perfectly aligned with the cause they serve. And so, the countless, numberless angelic armies, the seraphim burning with fiery love, the cherubim keepers of divine wisdom, the thrones, the dominions, the powers, all turned their celestial gaze. They didn't look to the brightest star, Lucifer, who was becoming a vortex of self-interest. They looked to the steady flame. They looked to the one whose name was a vow of allegiance. They looked to Michael. His appointment as leader wasn't a coronation. There was no crown, no scepter. It was a solemn, silent acceptance of a terrible, beautiful burden. It was the moment a protector became a general, the moment a guardian accepted his destiny as the commander of a war that no one wanted, but everyone knew was coming. The lines were being drawn, not in the sand, but in the very soul of eternity. And the first shot was about to be fired, before there was a before. Before time was measured in heartbeats or the slow turn of galaxies, there was harmony, an existence of pure, unblemished light. Imagine a symphony played on instruments of starlight and nebula, a sound so perfect it was also silence. In this reality, every note, every being, every thought was a perfect reflection of its source, a source of infinite love and creativity. There were no shadows because everything was light. There was no discord because everything was an extension of a single flawless will. But in the heart of this perfect system, something impossible was about to happen. A crack was about to appear in the unbreakable diamond of reality. A single dissonant note was preparing to sound in the eternal symphony, and it would come from the one place no one could have ever expected. Picture this, the most magnificent being ever to spring from the mind of God. Not a human, not a creature of flesh and bone, but an archangel, a being of pure energy and light, whose name meant light bringer. In the ancient texts, he is called Lucifer, the morning star. He was crafted with breathtaking wisdom, adorned with a beauty that would make stars weep. Every precious stone was his covering, his voice a choir of celestial music. He didn't just exist within the glory of God, he was a conduit for it. His purpose was simple and profound, to reflect the light of his Creator, to be a living, breathing testament to the beauty and love of the one who made him. He was the chief, the anointed cherub who covered the very throne of God. He stood at the epicenter of creation, bathed in the direct, unfiltered radiance of perfection itself. What could possibly go wrong in a place of such ultimate good, with a being of such ultimate beauty? This is the great paradox, the theological puzzle that has haunted thinkers for millennia. How does evil begin in a perfect environment? How does a perfect being choose imperfection? The answer is not a flaw in the design, but a feature, a terrifyingly beautiful, terrifyingly dangerous feature. Free will. Lucifer was not a puppet. He was not a pre-programmed machine of worship. He was a person with a mind, an identity, and the genuine freedom to choose. His love for God was only meaningful because he had the capacity not to love. For love to be real, the choice to reject it must also be real. And it was in this sacred space of choice that the seed was planted. It began with a subtle internal shift, a turning inward. Instead of reflecting the light, he began to admire the mirror. Have you ever caught your own reflection, and for a moment been more interested in your own image than in the world around you? That was the beginning. It started as a gaze. He looked upon his own wisdom, his own power, his own unparalleled beauty, and a new thought flickered into existence. A thought that was not a reflection of God, but a product of self. He saw the adoration of the other angels, the awe they held him in, and he began to mistake the reverence for the Creator for admiration of the creation. The glory he was meant to channel, he began to claim. The praise he was meant to redirect, he began to absorb. Slowly, degree by degree, the great celestial mirror turned from its sun. The love of God, which is selfless and flows outward, was being replaced by a new gravitational force. The love of self, a love that is selfish and pulls everything inward. It was a corruption not of malice at first, but of admiration. A deep, intoxicating, and ultimately fatal self-admiration. This quiet internal shift was about to become a loud, cosmic declaration of war. In the ancient scrolls of the prophet Isaiah, we find a chilling window into the mind of this falling star. A fivefold manifesto of rebellion, a ladder of pride descending into darkness. These are the 5 infamous I will statements that chart his internal coup d'etat. The first step was ambition. He said in his heart, I will ascend into heaven. Think about that. He was already in heaven, at the very peak of the created order. But this wasn't about location. It was about position. He was no longer content to be the highest of the created. He wanted to move into the category of the uncreated. It's the voice of the employee who is no longer satisfied with being the star performer, but now wants the title of CEO. A desire to break through the ceiling of his own existence. Theologians call this the foundational sin, superbia, or pride, the belief that one's own self is the ultimate authority. The second statement builds on the first, revealing a competitive, comparative pride. He declared, "I will exalt my throne above the stars of God." Suddenly, it's not just about his own ascent, it's about his position relative to others. The stars of God are widely interpreted as the other angels. He no longer saw them as brothers in a shared purpose, but as subjects to be ruled, as benchmarks to be surpassed. His throne, his personal seat of authority and honor, had to be higher than theirs. This is the root of envy. The joy he once found in the cosmic harmony was replaced by a bitter need to be superior. His brilliance could no longer coexist with the brilliance of others. It had to eclipse them. Is it not a deeply human story? The moment we stop celebrating the success of others and start seeing it as a threat to our own? The third declaration reveals a desire for dominion, for a place of ultimate control. "I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north." This isn't just poetic language. In ancient Near Eastern mythology, the sides of the north was the symbolic dwelling place of the gods, the divine command center. This was a claim for the seat of cosmic government. Lucifer was staking a claim on the very spot where divine assembly was held, where ultimate decisions were made. He was no longer content with merely being a high-ranking official in the kingdom. He wanted to sit in the king's council chamber, on the throne of executive power itself. The transition is chilling, from wanting a higher position to wanting a higher position than others, to now wanting the very place where all power is adjudicated. The rebellion was consolidating. It was no longer just a feeling. It was becoming a plan. The fourth "I will" is perhaps the most audacious yet. "I will ascend above the heights of the clouds." In ancient scripture, clouds are consistently used as a symbol of the very glory and presence of God himself, the Shekinah glory. They veiled his unapproachable light. So this statement is Lucifer saying, "I will not just sit in the council room. I will rise above the very manifestation of God's presence. I will pierce the veil. I will go beyond the glory that covers him and see him face to face, not as a worshiper, but as an equal." This is a breathtaking act of hubris. He desires to strip away all mystery, all reverence, all sense of the otherness of God. It is the creature attempting to storm the castle of the Creator, believing he has the right to enter the innermost chamber uninvited. But it's the fifth and final statement where the rebellion becomes absolute, where the mask comes off completely. And here it is, the final, terrible, self-deifying proclamation, "I will be like the Most High." All the other ambitions were steps leading to this one ultimate goal. He doesn't say, "I will be the Most High," because he knows that is an ontological impossibility. But he declares that he can be like him, an equal, a rival, a co-regent, a second independent source of power and will in the universe. This is the birth of cosmic dualism, the lie that there can be two ultimate authorities, two competing gods. It is the final definitive rejection of his created purpose. He was made to be a reflection, but he now seeks to be a source. He was made to be a song, but he now seeks to be the composer. Every ounce of his God-given wisdom was now fuel for this rebellion. His power, meant to uphold the divine order, was now being marshaled to shatter it. His beauty, a testament to God's genius, was now a banner for his own campaign of cosmic treason. In the silent chambers of his own heart, Lucifer the Lightbringer had declared himself God. And with that declaration, the perfect harmony of heaven was broken forever. The first sin had been committed not in an act, but in a thought, not in a word, but in a will. And from this single seed of pride, a dark forest of pain, chaos, and death would grow, its shadow stretching across eternity, eventually reaching a new fragile world, and a creature that would be made in the image of the very God he now despised. Before time, as we know it, had a name, before the silent expanse of space was punctuated by stars, there was something else, a reality not of matter but of mind, not of physics but of pure being. Imagine a symphony of existence played on instruments of light and thought, where every note was a perfect expression of love, a perfect echo of its creator. A harmony so complete, so breathtakingly beautiful, that the very idea of a discordant note was not just impossible, it was unthinkable. This was the first world, the realm of the angels. Beings of staggering intellect and incandescent beauty, each a unique, unrepeatable thought of God. They existed in a state of pure, unfiltered joy, bathed in the direct presence of their source. But even in perfection, a story needs a beginning, and every great story begins with a choice that would not just introduce a discordant note, but shatter the symphony forever. Every profound relationship, every true love eventually faces a moment of testing, not a test of trickery or malice, but a test of freedom, a moment where love must be freely chosen, or it isn't truly love at all. It's a principle woven into the fabric of our own lives. Think about it. A love that is forced, a loyalty that is programmed. Does it have any real value? The angels, for all their perfection, were not automatons. They were created with the most terrifying and glorious gift of all, a free will. And so a test was set, a probation, as the ancient theologians called it. It wasn't a puzzle to be solved or a riddle to be answered. It was a question posed not to their minds, but to the very core of their being, a question of ultimate allegiance, a question of love. They were to be shown the deepest, most secret thought in the mind of God, the master plan for all of creation, and they would be asked to consent, to give their yes, to freely choose to participate in this grand, unfolding cosmic drama. Little did they know, this plan was so radical, so profoundly shocking, it would ask of them something that many would find impossible. They were about to see a future that would defy their very nature. Picture this: the celestial court, an infinite assembly of light and fire, gathers. There is a hush, a stillness that feels like the universe holding its breath. And then, the vision is unveiled. It unfolds not on a screen, but directly into their minds, a torrent of information and emotion that is both beautiful and utterly baffling. They see the future. They see the creation of a new realm, a physical universe of dust, water, and fire. They see the sculpting of a fragile new kind of creature, a being made of mud and breath, a messy, beautiful, contradictory thing called humanity. The angels watched, fascinated, as the story of this creature played out. But this was only the prelude. The true revelation, the heart of the vision, was yet to come. The divine light at the center of all things began to focus, to coalesce into a single unimaginable image. It was the image of God, but not as they knew him, not as a boundless, formless, all-powerful spirit. He was taking on the form of one of those creatures of clay. God, the uncontainable, was to be contained within a womb. The eternal was to enter time. The all-knowing was to learn and grow. The source of all strength was to become a helpless baby. This was the incarnation, the plan for the God-man. He would walk their muddy earth, breathe their common air, feel their fleeting joy and their crushing pain. And he would not be doing this as a visitor in a costume. He would be one of them, truly and completely. And then came the final universe-altering command that accompanied the vision. This is my son, and you will serve him. Serve him. A collective shockwave, a silent gasp of 1 trillion minds rippled through the heavenly hosts. The command was absolute. They, the firstborn of creation, beings of pure spirit and immense power, were being asked to bow before a being of a lower nature, a hybrid of spirit and flesh. How could the perfect be asked to serve the imperfect? How could the timeless serve the temporary? In this infinite assembly stood one being brighter, more magnificent than all the rest. His name was Lucifer, the light bringer, the morning star. He was, by all accounts, the masterpiece of creation, the pinnacle of angelic nature. His intellect was a razor, his beauty a thing of cosmic awe. He stood closer to the throne of God than any other. And in that moment of revelation, as the vision of the God-man solidified, something in him broke. For him, this wasn't a plan of love. It was an error in logic, an insult, a cosmic demotion. All of existence was a hierarchy, a beautiful, perfect ladder ascending towards the ultimate perfection of God. Angels were higher than men. Spirit was superior to matter. This was the fundamental order of reality. To ask him to serve a being composed of flesh and blood was, in his mind, a perversion of that order. It was an absurdity. The thought began to poison his mind, a single seductive whisper, "Non serviam," I will not serve. It's crucial to understand that Lucifer's sin wasn't just simple disobedience. The ancient texts frame it as a sin of pride, the belief that his own understanding, his own sense of order, was superior to God's. He couldn't see the love, he could only see the perceived flaw in the design. He saw a God who would lower himself, who would embrace weakness, and he found it contemptible. He loved the Creator, yes, but perhaps he loved the Creator's gifts, his own brilliance, his own beauty, even more. This plan, this humbling of God, it offended his sense of aesthetics, his sense of reason. The whisper grew into a declaration. Why should he, the light bringer, bow to a creature of dirt who would one day wear the crown of creation? A new, terrible idea began to form in his perfect mind. A universe run on his own terms. A universe where the strong were not asked to serve the weak. A universe where his own light would be the ultimate authority. He looked upon the vision of the God-man, not with awe, but with envy and rage. And he made his choice. That single defiant thought, "I will not serve," did not remain silent. It ripped through the fabric of heaven's harmony like a scream. Lucifer turned to his fellow angels, his brilliant light now flickering with a cold, persuasive fire. He articulated their shock, gave voice to their confusion. He presented the plan for the incarnation not as a mystery of love, but as a foolish, illogical act, a betrayal of their own elevated nature. Have you ever seen how a single, powerful, charismatic voice can take a moment of confusion and twist it into a movement of anger and division? This was that moment, on a cosmic scale. The perfect unity of heaven fractured. The singular symphony shattered into a million warring melodies. Angels, for the first time, looked at their brothers not with love, but with suspicion. Lines were being drawn in the light. Some were swayed by Lucifer's logic. It appealed to their pride, to their sense of order. Why should they bow? They were the first and the greatest. They chose to stand with the morning star, convinced by his argument for a more rational order. But others saw something different in the vision. They saw not a cosmic demotion, but an act of love so profound it was beyond their comprehension. They saw a God willing to become vulnerable, to bridge the infinite gap between Creator and creation. They saw humility as the ultimate power, and love as the ultimate logic. They looked at the image of the God-man, this fragile being of flesh and spirit, and they did not feel contempt. They felt an overwhelming wave of awe and protective love. Their choice was not born of logic, but of faith. Their answer was a resounding, thunderous, "Yes, we will serve." The shock had turned to schism. Heaven was no longer a kingdom in harmony. It was a house divided, on the brink of a war that would scar eternity. A war started not by a monster, but by a single beautiful being who could not bring himself to bend his knee in love. The first rebellion had its cause. The first battle lines were drawn, and all of creation held its breath, waiting for the first blow to fall. Before there was time, before the first star ignited the darkness, there was harmony, a perfect, resonant chord that filled all of existence. It was a symphony of light and purpose, sung by beings of unimaginable glory. Every angel had a voice, every voice had a part, and the music was absolute. It was peace. But in the heart of perfection, a single dissonant thought was born, a thought that would one day tear the heavens apart. It began not with a roar, but with a whisper. His name was Lucifer, the light bringer, the most brilliant of all the celestials. Picture him, a being woven from the dawn, adorned with wisdom, a masterpiece of creation. But brilliance can cast a long shadow. Within this perfect being, the whisper grew into a question, a quiet, venomous inquiry he first posed only to himself. Why? Why serve? Why bow? Why reflect light when you can be the source of it? This question became his secret gospel, the core of a campaign that would be the most successful and most tragic in the history of existence. He didn't begin by preaching open rebellion. That would have been too crude, too obvious. His method was far more insidious, more human. He moved through the celestial courts not as a revolutionary, but as a concerned friend. He would find a cherub polishing the sapphire thrones and murmur, "Your work is beautiful." Does the Creator truly see its value, or does he simply take it for granted? He would approach a legion of seraphs, their wings of fire beating in unison, and plant a seed of doubt. You are beings of immense power. Is this your only purpose? To stand guard? To sing praise? Don't you ever wonder what else you could become? Have you ever felt that tiny spark of resentment when your hard work goes unnoticed? Lucifer took that spark and fanned it into a wildfire. His argument was a masterclass in manipulation built on the scaffolding of pride. He called it self-respect. He called it unlocking one's potential. He told his fellow angels that they were being stifled, that their obedience was not devotion, but a cage. He framed the Creator's unconditional love as a form of control and his authority as tyranny. "Look at yourselves," he would say, his voice a mesmerizing blend of compassion and incitement. "You are not puppets. You have minds. You have will. True freedom isn't found in following a plan, but in writing your own. Why should your destiny be authored by another?" He was selling them the oldest and most tempting lie in the universe, that they could be their own gods. Ancient texts describe him as being adorned with every precious stone imaginable, a symbol not just of beauty, but of a perfection that led him to believe he was complete in and of himself, needing no one higher. And his message found fertile ground. For some, it was a liberating truth. For others, it was a justification for a long-held secret jealousy. The whispers multiplied. The harmony of heaven began to fray, the perfect chord now marred by murmurs of discontent. Alliances shifted in the shimmering light of the celestial city. Angels who had existed in unity for eons now looked at each other with suspicion. The air grew thick with unspoken questions. Who are you with? What do you truly believe? The universe was holding its breath. The whisper was about to become a shout, and in the face of this growing shadow, another light was about to step forward. He was called Michael, the Archangel. Where Lucifer was the politician, Michael was the soldier. Where Lucifer's weapon was the subtle poison of suggestion, Michael's was the unyielding steel of truth. He watched as the discord spread, as friends and brothers were turned by Lucifer's intoxicating rhetoric of self-exaltation. He felt the symphony of heaven falter, and his heart, a core of pure loyalty, ached with the pain of it. He did not engage in debates in the shadows. He did not flatter or cajole. His response was a single, thunderous declaration that cut through the growing chaos. He stood before the heavenly court, before the wavering and the confused, and he did not offer a counter-argument to Lucifer's platform of self-love. He offered a counter-question, a question that was also his name, Michael. The words echoed through the eternal halls, not as a boast, but as a challenge. It meant, who is like God? It was a rhetorical question that laid everything bare. It exposed Lucifer's entire campaign for what it was, a fool's errand. A creature trying to usurp its creator, a shadow trying to swallow the sun. He wasn't just asking a question. He was drawing a line in the sands of eternity. Michael's call was not to power, but to remembrance. Remember the hands that shaped you, his voice rang out. Remember the love that gave you life, the purpose that gives you meaning. The freedom Lucifer offers you is a phantom. It is the freedom of a star to leave its orbit, only to become a cold, wandering rock in the darkness. True freedom, true glory, is found in our place within the grand design. In the music, to serve him is not bondage. It is our highest honor. It is our very identity. He rallied the loyal not with promises of what they could gain, but with a reminder of what they stood to lose. Everything. And so the choice was made. There was no middle ground, no neutrality. In that moment, the great schism occurred. The population of heaven, once a single unified family, was irrevocably broken in two. Imagine the heartbreak of it, the tearing apart of friendships that were older than the mountains of earth. Brothers choosing opposite sides. The silent, agonizing moment when you look at someone you have loved for eternity and realize you are now enemies. The perfect harmony was shattered, replaced by a deafening silence, pregnant with the promise of violence. The lines were drawn, not on a map, but through the very heart of heaven itself. On one side, a new army began to form, a terrifying and beautiful sight. A third of the stars of heaven, as the old texts say. Angels of every rank and order, their light now pulsing with a new, defiant fire. Led by Lucifer, they turned their backs on the throne of creation. They were no longer guardians and messengers. They were rebels, revolutionaries. Their banners were woven with the threads of pride and ambition. Their war cry was the anthem of the self. We will be our own light. They were a magnificent, tragic force, convinced of their own righteousness, marching toward a war they could not possibly comprehend. Opposing them stood Michael and the loyal hosts. They did not burn with the fever of rebellion, but with the steady, white-hot flame of devotion. They were the defenders of the divine order, the champions of loyalty. They raised their own banners, not in the name of their own glory, but in the name of the one they served. They prepared for a war they never wanted, a defense of the home they loved against their own brothers. It was a moment of profound sorrow and iron-willed resolve. Have you ever had to stand for what you believe in, even if it meant standing against someone you care about? This was that moment, on a cosmic scale. Two immense armies born from a single family now faced each other across the celestial plane. The song of creation had ended. The drums of war were about to begin. The first war was not for territory or for thrones. It was a war for the definition of reality itself, and its first casualty would be peace. Before there was time, before the first star was hung in the velvet blackness, before the silent dust of the cosmos knew it was destined to become mountains and oceans and life, there was a perfect quiet, a harmony so complete it was the very definition of existence. It was a reality woven from light, sound, and a love that was both the power source and the architecture of everything. But in the heart of that flawless peace, something was about to break. A single, dissonant thought, like a crack spreading across a mirror, was about to introduce the universe to its very first war. How do you fight a war when the battlefield is perfection itself? Picture this, not a place of clouds and golden gates, but a dimension of pure being, a reality where thought is action and existence is a symphony. Every inhabitant, a unique note, a radiant point of consciousness contributing to a singular, magnificent song. These are the beings we would come to call angels. They are not chubby cherubs with harps. They are entities of immense power, of staggering intellect, of will so potent it could shape reality. They were the firstborn of creation, living in the immediate, unfiltered presence of their creator. And for an immeasurable eternity there was only unity. There was only love. There was only truth. But truth by its nature has an opposite. And in a place of infinite possibility, even the impossible can begin to seem plausible. The first casualty of this war wasn't a soldier. It was a thought, a whisper that began in the mind of the most brilliant of all created beings, the light bearer, the morning star. an archangel of breathtaking beauty and wisdom, whose role was to reflect the glory of the Creator more perfectly than any other. But a reflection can become distorted. The whisper started small, a seed of cosmic narcissism. Why only reflect the light? Why not be the source? It was a lie wrapped in logic, a poison coated in beauty. This idea, this virus of self-love began to spread. It wasn't a revolution planned in secret war rooms. It was a philosophical pandemic, an infection of the will. Have you ever seen how one toxic idea, one seductive lie, can unravel a family, a community, a nation? Now imagine that on a cosmic scale. This is where the ancient texts, specifically the Book of Revelation, give us a window into this impossible event. The 12th chapter, in stark and terrifying language, simply states, "And war broke out in heaven." 3 words that shatter our concept of a peaceful eternity. It names the leaders of the 2 factions. On one side, the great dragon, that ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He is not alone. A third of the stars of heaven, a third of the angelic host, are swept from their place by this rebellion of the ego. They chose the lie. They chose themselves. And on the other side, Michael and his angels. The name Michael in the original Hebrew isn't just a name. It's a question and a declaration all in one. Mikael, who is like God. This wasn't just his title. It would become his weapon. Now we have to unlearn everything we think we know about war. Angelic combat isn't the clash of steel on steel. There are no explosions, no shrapnel, no physical bodies to be broken. So what does a battle between beings of pure spirit actually look like? It's a war of truth. It is a metaphysical struggle where the primary weapon is the declaration of what is real. The rebels, led by the dragon, wielded the power of the lie. They projected a false reality, an alternative universe where the self was the ultimate authority. Their every thought was a broadcast of propaganda, an assault of sophistry and deception designed to warp the very fabric of heaven's reality. Imagine a sound that is also an argument, a light that is also a lie, a force that seeks not to kill you, but to convince you that you were never truly alive to begin with. That is the nature of their attack. It was a war for the soul of reality itself. And against this overwhelming tide of illusion, Michael had to find a weapon made of something stronger than any lie. The scale of this confrontation is almost beyond our ability to imagine. This wasn't a battle for a hill or a city. It was a conflict that engulfed an entire dimension. The heavens in this context refers to the entire spiritual realm. Visualize supernovas of pure will exploding in the void. See constellations of loyal angels holding a line against swirling nebulae of doubt and rage. The energies unleashed were not heat and radiation, but fundamental forces of existence. Love against pride, humility against arrogance, truth against deception. Every loyal angel became a living bastion of reality. Their very existence a defiant statement against the encroaching chaos. They didn't fight with swords of light. They were the swords of light. Their allegiance was their armor. Their faith was their shield. The universe itself seemed to hold its breath as the first and greatest family tore itself apart. And in the heart of this cosmic storm stood Michael. He wasn't necessarily the strongest in terms of raw power. The dragon, after all, was the morning star, a being of immense capability. Michael's strength was of a different kind. It wasn't rooted in what he was, but in what he knew. He understood the fundamental lie of the rebellion. The dragon's entire platform was built on the premise of self-exaltation, the idea that a created being could become its own god. It's the oldest lie in the book, the one that still echoes in our own world today, whispering that we are the captains of our own souls, the masters of our own destiny, accountable to no one. Michael saw this lie for what it was, a black hole of the self, a nothingness that consumes all light and offers only oblivion. So he prepared his counterattack. It wasn't a complex strategy. It wasn't a secret weapon. It was a single, devastatingly simple truth. As the forces of rebellion surged, projecting their illusions of self-supremacy, Michael unleashed his war cry. It wasn't just a shout that echoed through the spiritual ether. It was a question that was also an answer, a sound that was also a reality check. He roared his own name into the heart of the battle. Who is like God? This wasn't an angry challenge. It was a statement of fact. A rhetorical question so powerful, so self-evident, that it shattered the very foundation of the rebellion. Imagine a sonic boom that doesn't break windows, but breaks spells. A frequency that doesn't just vibrate air, but realigns reality itself back to its factory settings. The war cry, "Who is like God?" was a blast of pure, unadulterated truth that incinerated every lie it touched. It reminded every single being in that battle, loyalist and rebel alike, of the fundamental order of existence. There is a creator and there is creation. To pretend otherwise is not just wrong, it is insane. It is an attempt to divide by zero. The power of Michael's cry was the power of cosmic truth, and against it, the rebellion's grand delusion simply dissolved. The lie could not withstand the light. The battle was over. The great dragon was cast out, hurled down from the high courts of heaven. And with him, all the angels who had chosen his path, their light forever dimmed, their glorious forms twisted by their pride. Revelation describes a loud voice in heaven proclaiming, "Now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God." There was victory. There was relief. The source of the discord had been purged. But can we really imagine it was a purely joyous celebration? A third of their brethren were gone. An eternal family had been irrevocably broken. The first war had ended, but it had introduced something new into the universe. A scar. A memory of betrayal. And what happens to a war when it runs out of territory in one dimension? It moves to the next. The great dragon, the ancient serpent, was cast down to the earth. The celestial conflict was not truly over. Its battlefield had simply been relocated. That pristine, silent planet, waiting to be filled with mountains and oceans and life. It was about to become the new front line. The war that began in heaven would now become the secret war for the heart of humanity. The same lies, the same whispers of pride and self-worship that tore heaven apart would now be aimed at a new, fragile creation made of dust and divine breath. Have you ever felt like you are a battleground for two opposing forces, a pull towards hope and a drag towards despair? That feeling isn't an illusion. It is the echo of this ancient war, a conflict that is now intensely personal. The serpent had fallen into the garden, and he was about to make his first move. Before time had a name, before the first star was hung in the velvet blackness of space. There was a perfect harmony, a symphony of pure light and unconditional love, played on an infinite scale. Imagine a silence so full it contained every beautiful song ever written. Imagine a light so brilliant it was both the source of all color and the gentle warmth of home. This was heaven, not a place of clouds and harps, but a state of perfect, unending communion. Every being, every angel, was a unique note in this cosmic orchestra, and their purpose was simple: to exist in joy, to reflect the glory of their Creator, and to love. In this perfect existence, there was no concept of shadow, no word for pain, no feeling of being alone. Everything was connected, everything was one, but even in perfection a choice can be made, and a single solitary thought can become a seed. At the heart of this celestial court was a being of unimaginable beauty. The morning star, the light bearer, an archangel so radiant, his brilliance was second only to the Creator himself. His name was Lucifer. He was the conductor's first violin, the lead singer in the choir of eternity. He saw the intricate design of creation, understood the flow of cosmic law, and felt the power that pulsed through the heart of reality. And in that knowing, that seeing, the seed of pride began to sprout. It was a subtle thought at first, a whisper in the symphony. I am beautiful, I am wise, I am powerful. The thought was true, but then it twisted. Why should I reflect the light when I can be the light? Why should I serve when I could rule? Have you ever felt that whisper? That dangerous little voice that tells you you're the main character in everyone else's story. This thought, once born, became a virus. It spread. Lucifer, with his charisma and immense stature, began to sow seeds of dissent among the other angels. He didn't preach hatred. He preached self-love, twisted into self-worship. He spoke of freedom, reframing it as freedom from the Creator. He promised them they could be their own gods, authors of their own destiny, no longer mere reflections of a greater glory. Theological traditions suggest that a full third of the angelic host was swayed by this argument, a testament to the seductive power of pride. The perfect harmony of heaven began to fracture. A discordant note grew into a deafening roar. An army of light, now fueled by the shadow of ambition, began to gather. They chose themselves over their source. They chose rebellion over relationship. The first civil war was not fought over land or resources. It was fought over a single fundamental question: who is worthy of worship? And as the lines were drawn, another archangel, whose name meant "who is like God," stepped forward into the breach. His name was Michael. He was not necessarily the strongest, nor the most brilliant, but his will was forged in absolute, unshakable love for his creator. He saw Lucifer's rebellion not as a bid for freedom, but as a path to cosmic suicide, a severing from the very source of life and light. Michael raised his sword, not just a weapon of steel, but a blade of pure, divine truth. His war cry was his own name, a question thrown back at the rebels: who is like God? It echoed through the heavens, a challenge and a declaration. And behind him, the loyal angels rallied. Picture this: a battle not of flesh and blood, but of light and will. The air itself crackles with power. The songs of praise become war cries. The light of heaven, once warm and gentle, now flashes and burns like lightning. As Michael's forces clash with the twisted, self-serving brilliance of Lucifer's legion. This wasn't just a fight. It was a purification, a necessary, agonizing, and terrifying moment of decision for all of creation. Every choice has a consequence, and the consequence of this war would define reality forever. The battle raged, a storm of celestial energy that shook the foundations of eternity. But pride, for all its fire and fury, is hollow. It consumes itself. Love, however, endures. It is rooted in something eternal. Michael's army, fueled by devotion, fought not for their own glory, but for the preservation of harmony itself. And in a final cataclysmic clash, Lucifer was overcome. His light, once so pure, now flickered with rage and hatred. He was defeated, not just militarily, but ideologically. The great lie that a created being could be its own source of light was exposed. The verdict was absolute. There could be no place for this cancerous pride in a realm of perfect unity. The sentence was not imprisonment. It was expulsion, a casting out, a severing. Imagine being thrown out of the only home you have ever known, not by an enemy, but by the very family you chose to betray. And so they fell. It wasn't a gentle descent. It was a violent, tearing separation. Picture Lucifer, the morning star, stripped of his name and his glory, plummeting from the heights of existence. He and his followers were cast down like lightning from the sky. The fall was not just a change in location. It was a change in being. As they fell away from the light within them began to die. Their beauty curdled into something monstrous. Their songs of praise became shrieks of rage and despair. They were falling away from love, from truth, from reality itself. They were falling into a state of their own making, a reality defined by the very thing they chose, themselves and themselves alone. They were not being sent to a place of punishment. They were becoming the punishment itself. This is the theological heart of the story, the fall from grace. It isn't just an ancient myth about winged creatures. It's a profound exploration of free will. The angels were created perfect, but they were not created as puppets. They were given the capacity to choose, and true choice must include the option to choose wrongly, the option to reject love. Lucifer's sin wasn't just disobedience. It was the ultimate act of cosmic narcissism. It was the desire to replace God, to make the self the center of the universe. This is the origin story of evil, not as an equal and opposite force to good, but as a perversion of it, a twisting of it. The name Lucifer, meaning light bringer, is what he was. The name Satan, meaning the accuser or the adversary, is what he became through his choice. His fall wasn't a tragedy that happened to him. It was the inevitable outcome of a choice he freely made. And what of hell? Our culture paints it with fire and pitchforks, but its true theological horror is far more profound. Hell is not a torture chamber created by a vindictive God. It is the natural consequence of choosing to be permanently separated from Him. It is the ultimate quarantine. God is love. He is life. He is light. To be eternally separated from God by your own choice is to be eternally separated from everything that gives existence meaning. It is a state of total isolation where the ego is the only thing left, Imagine an eternity with nothing but your own rage, your own bitterness, your own unending, unsatisfied pride for company. That is the essence of hell. Not the presence of fire, but the absolute crushing absence of God's love. It is the echo of a door slammed shut from the inside. What could be more terrifying than an eternity of being utterly, completely alone with the worst version of yourself? Back in heaven, the war was over. The discordant noise was gone. But the silence that followed was different from the silence that came before. It was heavier. The symphony was restored, but it was now missing a third of its instruments. For the loyal angels, there was an overwhelming sense of relief, of victory, of righteous joy. The truth had prevailed. The harmony of creation had been defended and preserved. Their love for their Creator was affirmed, deepened by the trial it had just endured. They sang new songs, songs of victory and faithfulness. But underneath the joy, perhaps there was also a note of sorrow. A deep, divine sadness for their lost brothers and sisters, for the beauty that had been corrupted, for the family that was now irrevocably broken. The first wound had been inflicted upon creation. Meanwhile, the defeated felt none of that sorrow. There was only rage, a seething, impotent fury, the rage of a thwarted tyrant, the bitterness of a being who had gambled everything on his own glory and lost. His new name, Satan, the adversary, was now his entire identity. Cast down but not destroyed, his one remaining purpose was born from that rage. If he could not rule heaven, he would seek to corrupt and destroy the one thing the Creator was about to make next. A new world, and a new creation made in God's own image. The war in heaven was over, but the war for earth was just about to begin. Before time as we know it had a name, before the first sunrise scarred the dark, there was a war. Not a war of steel and fire, but of light and shadow, of will and worship, a rebellion in the heart of eternity, led by the brightest of all created beings. He lost, cast out, stripped of glory, he became a wandering king of a broken kingdom, nursing a wound that could never heal, the wound of pride. Defeated but not destroyed, humiliated but not humbled. He was left with nothing but his hatred for the one who had defeated him. And so he waited. He watched. He looked for a new battlefield. And then God gave him one. Picture this: a world without a single broken thing. A planet breathing in perfect rhythm. A symphony of life where every note was in harmony. The air itself hummed with peace, thick with the scent of blossoms that never faded, and earth that had never been stained by blood. This was the Garden of Eden. It wasn't just a place. It was an idea, a living, breathing testament to God's creative joy. And at the heart of it all were his masterpieces, the man and the woman, Adam and Eve. They were more than just flesh and bone. They were walking echoes of the divine, crafted in God's own image. Their relationship with their Creator was as natural as breathing. There was no shame, no fear, no distance. It was pure, unfiltered connection. Every sunset was a shared masterpiece, every conversation a walk among friends. They were the stewards of a perfect world, the children of a loving Father. What could possibly go wrong in a world like that? The defeated prince of the air saw this new creation, and his ancient hatred found a new focus. He saw humanity, and he didn't just see a creature. He saw a vulnerability. He saw God's heart, exposed and walking in a garden in the cool of the day. His strategy had to change. A direct assault on the throne of heaven had failed spectacularly. But a proxy war, that was a different matter entirely. He couldn't hurt God directly, but he could wound him by destroying what he loved. He could deface the masterpiece. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about ideology. It was about proving that God's creation was flawed, that these beloved image bearers were just as corruptible as he was. The garden wasn't just a home. It was now the front line in a war that had begun in eternity. And humanity, innocent and unaware, was standing at ground zero. The weapon of choice wouldn't be fire or fury. It would be a whisper, a single perfectly crafted question. The adversary chose his disguise with brilliant cunning. Not a monster, not a raging beast, but a serpent. The original Hebrew word, nachash, can mean more than just snake. It can imply a shining, mesmerizing creature. This wasn't some common reptile. It was an emissary of fallen light, beautiful and captivating. He approaches the woman, Eve, when she is alone, another calculated move, and he doesn't begin with a command or a threat. He begins with a question designed to plant a seed of poison. Did God really say? It sounds so innocent, doesn't it? Have you ever had a thought start just like that? A little seed of doubt that questions everything you thought was solid. He wasn't just questioning a rule, he was questioning the very character of God. He was subtly suggesting that God was a cosmic killjoy, a withholder of good things, a liar. This is psychological warfare at its most sophisticated. Step 1, isolate the target. Step 2, question the authority's goodness. He makes God's one simple boundary, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, seem like an arbitrary, restrictive cage. He reframes freedom as bondage. Then comes step 3, undermine the truth with a direct contradiction. God had said, "You will surely die." The serpent counters with the first lie ever told on earth, "You will not surely die." He presents death not as a consequence, but as a scare tactic used by a controlling deity. He presents God not as a protector, but as a competitor, afraid that humanity might rise to his level. This is the masterstroke of his argument. He doesn't just promise survival, he promises an upgrade. Your eyes will be opened, he hisses, and you will be like God. He offers divinity. He offers the one thing that he himself had coveted and lost. He was selling the very poison that had led to his own damnation, repackaged as liberation. "And Eve?" She was listening. The words hung in the perfect air, a dissonant chord in the symphony of Eden. Eve looked at the fruit. Before it was just a tree, a part of the landscape defined by a single loving boundary. Now, through the serpent's filter, it was transformed. It was good for food, an appeal to the body. It was a delight to the eyes, an appeal to the soul. And it was desirable to make one wise, an appeal to the spirit, a promise of power and self-determination. The lie had done its work. It had created a desire where none existed before. It made God's loving command feel like an oppressive chain. In that moment, Eve stood at a cosmic crossroads. On one side, trust in the word of her creator. On the other, trust in her own judgment, fueled by the whisper of a liar. Was God holding her back? Or was he protecting her from something she couldn't possibly understand? She reached out her hand. The world held its breath. The leaves on the tree didn't rustle. The birds fell silent. There was a pause, a fracture in time, pregnant with the weight of all that was to come. And then she took it. The skin of the fruit was cool against her warm fingers. She brought it to her lips, and she ate. In that single act of defiance, a universe of possibility collapsed into a single, tragic reality. There was no thunderclap, no bolt of lightning, just a quiet, horrifying internal shift. She gave some to her husband Adam, who was with her. He didn't argue. He didn't protest. He simply took it, and he ate. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. It was the sound of a connection being severed, the sound of innocence dying. The war was over. The battle for Eden had been lost. And then their eyes were opened, but they didn't see a new world of godlike power. They saw their own nakedness. For the first time, they felt a chilling, alien emotion, shame. A deep, gnawing sense of being exposed, flawed, and vulnerable. They, who had walked with God in total freedom, were now frantically stitching together fig leaves to cover themselves, a futile attempt to hide their brokenness from each other and from themselves. The very intimacy that had defined them was now a source of embarrassment. And then they heard it, the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, a sound that once brought them joy, now filled them with another new emotion, fear. And so they did what no human had ever done before. They ran, they hid from the source of all life. Think about that. The first instinct of fallen humanity wasn't to fight or to confess, but to hide from the very presence of love. The perfect communication line was now filled with static. When God called out, "Where are you?" it wasn't a question of geography. It was a question of the heart. A father's cry for his lost children, and out of the shadows came the third poison, blame. Adam blamed Eve. "The woman you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree." Eve in turn blamed the serpent. "The serpent deceived me." The perfect circle of love and responsibility was shattered, replaced by a chain of finger-pointing, a desperate attempt to shift the crushing weight of their choice onto someone else. The unity of creation began to fracture right then and there. This was the immediate fallout: shame, fear, and blame. The spiritual malware had been installed, and the entire operating system of humanity was now corrupt. The consequences rippled outwards from that single act. The ground itself was cursed. Work, once a joyful act of co-creation with God, would now be a struggle, filled with thorns, thistles, and sweat. Childbirth, the beautiful process of bringing forth new life, would be racked with pain. The beautiful, harmonious relationship between man and woman would be distorted by conflict and a struggle for control. And the serpent, he was cursed to crawl on his belly, a symbol of his ultimate defeat. But within that curse, God embedded a cryptic, stunning promise. He spoke to the serpent, but his words were for all of history to hear. He promised that a descendant of the woman, a son of Eve, would one day come, and he would crush the serpent's head, even as the serpent struck his heel. This verse, Genesis 3:15, is often called the proto-evangelium, the very first glimpse of the gospel, a promise of a future rescuer whispered in the smoldering ruins of paradise. But that rescuer was a long way off. For now, the verdict was exile. God, in an act that was both judgment and mercy, drove them out of the garden. He couldn't allow them to eat from the tree of life and live forever in their broken, fallen state. That would be an eternal hell, so he barred the way back. He placed cherubim, angelic warriors of fire, and a flaming sword that turned every way to guard the path to eternal life. Imagine that final walk out of paradise, the warmth of God's immediate presence fading behind them, replaced by a cold, unfamiliar wind. The gate to their home, their perfect world, closing for the last time. They were now pioneers in a new, harsher reality, a world of struggle, of sorrow, and of death. The war was not over. In fact, it had just truly begun, and the entire human story, from that moment forward, would be the story of that conflict, fought in the soul of every person ever born. The story of a long, painful search for the way back home. There is a ghost in the machine of civilization, an echo in an empty room. It's the unseen architect of our most magnificent failures, the silent partner in our most celebrated vanities. It's the subtle pressure you feel in a crowd, the cold static of a lie whispered just for you, the invisible gravity that pulls a good intention off its course. We've given it 1,000 names across 1,000 cultures, trying to pin down a shadow. We've painted its portrait in fire and fear, often missing the chilling reality of its true nature. This is not a story about a monster with horns. This is a story about a king, a prince, ruling a dominion he did not create, but one he has masterfully, tragically made his own. And his throne is built on a single, catastrophic idea that he could be like God. Picture this. Before time, before dust, before the first sunrise bled across a new world, there was a harmony, a celestial court of unimaginable light and purpose. And among the most brilliant of these beings was one whose name meant light bearer. He was a masterpiece of creation, clothed in splendor. But a fissure appeared in that perfection, not from the outside but from within. A single dark thought bloomed in the heart of light. I will ascend. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will make myself like the Most High. It was the original sin, not of action, but of ambition. Pride. The belief that the created could supplant the creator. And in that moment of cosmic treason, the light bearer fell. He didn't just fall. He was cast out, plummeting from the heights of heaven, his brilliance warped into a burning shadow. He lost his home, but he was given a realm. He was made the prince of this world. Now this is where it gets complicated, and where most of our modern ideas get it wrong. His dominion isn't one of absolute control. He doesn't pull the strings of every human being like a puppet master. Think of him less as an emperor and more as a warden of an open-air prison, a squatter on a planet that doesn't belong to him. He was granted a lease, not ownership. His authority is real, but it is limited. He operates within a set of cosmic rules. He can influence, but he cannot force. He can tempt, but he cannot compel. He is the prince of the power of the air, the unseen systems, the cultural currents, the prevailing ideologies that drift through our world like smoke, getting into our lungs before we even realize we're breathing them in. His kingdom is the background noise of human history, the subtle corruption that tarnishes every revolution and every renaissance. How do you fight an enemy who rules the very atmosphere you exist in? To understand his strategy, you have to know his titles. They aren't just names, they are a mission statement. First, he is called the Father of Lies. This is his primary weapon. A lie is more than just a false statement. It's a counterfeit reality. His first lie, whispered in a garden, was a masterpiece of deception. Did God really say? Just a simple question, planting a seed of doubt. Then the poison. You will not surely die. You will be like God. Notice the pattern? He mirrors his own ambition, his own fall, and offers it to humanity as a path to liberation. He doesn't invent new sins. He just repackages his own. Every lie we tell ourselves, every comforting falsehood we cling to, every grand ideology built on a cracked foundation, they all trace their lineage back to that first world-breaking deception. The Greek word for devil, diabolos, literally means slanderer, or one who throws something across your path to trip you up. His very name is the act of deception. His second title is just as terrifying, the accuser of our brethren. If the lie is his arrow, the accusation is the poison on its tip. This is his legalistic prosecutorial role. He stands before God day and night, presenting a meticulous, damning case against humanity. He is the cosmic district attorney, and his evidence is our own failure, our own shame. He points out every sin, every mistake, every broken promise. He is the voice that whispers your worst moments back to you in the dead of night. He magnifies your guilt until it blots out all grace. That inner critic that tells you you're worthless, that you've gone too far, that you can never be forgiven. Have you ever wondered where it learned your name? On a global scale, this spirit of accusation fuels our outrage cycles, our tribalism, our rush to judgment. It thrives on social media, in newsrooms, and in political arenas, creating a world where everyone is a prosecutor and everyone is on trial. It's a kingdom of endless accusation, where forgiveness is weakness and mercy is a forgotten language. Trace this influence through the annals of history, and you see the same pattern repeated on a horrifying scale. Look at the Tower of Babel. It wasn't just a building. It was a monument to human pride, a unified declaration. Let us make a name for ourselves. It was the echo of an angel's ambition, now writ large in brick and mortar by a civilization he was subtly influencing. The project wasn't just about height. It was about storming the heavens, about humanity becoming its own god. And the result? Confusion, division, the scattering of humanity. That is the ultimate outcome of his work, to take unity and shatter it into a million warring pieces. He doesn't need to build his own empire. He just needs to convince us to tear ours down. This fight isn't confined to the past. The clash with the Prince of Persia, the stand at Jericho, these are not isolated events. They are glimpses behind the curtain into an ongoing war. The angelic messenger in Daniel's story even says that when he leaves, the Prince of Greece will come. This reveals a pattern. As earthly empires rise and fall, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, and on through to our modern age, there are corresponding spiritual powers influencing them from behind the scenes. These forces, under the command of a cosmic rebel, Satan, work to sow chaos, to inspire tyranny, to twist ideologies, and to erect strongholds of darkness in the world. Their ultimate goal is to thwart the plan of God. And because Israel has always been central to that plan, they have always been a primary target. Is it any wonder, then, that this small nation has been at the center of so much of world history, surviving against all odds, surrounded by empires that would see it erased? Michael's role is to be the counterforce. He is the front-line defense against these unseen aggressors. He is God's appointed general in the war for the soul of nations, with a specific and unyielding mandate to stand guard over his people. His very name is his mission statement. In the original Hebrew, Michael is a question. Mi kamocha el? Who is like God? It's not a question of curiosity, it's a challenge. It's a battle cry. It's a defiant declaration hurled into the face of any power, any prince, any spirit, any ego that would dare to exalt itself above the Creator. It is a constant reminder that all other powers are finite, created, and ultimately subject to the one true God. When Satan, the original rebel, said in his pride, "I will make myself like the Most High," Michael's entire existence became the eternal answer. Who is like God? There is no one. He doesn't fight for his own glory. He fights to defend the honor of the one he serves. His power is derived not from himself, but from his perfect, unwavering loyalty. So Michael is not just a mythic warrior with a sword. He is presented in these ancient texts as a real, active, and immensely powerful being with a specific earthly assignment. He is the guardian of Israel. He is the commander who leads the charge when the spiritual forces of darkness move to block, to corrupt, or to destroy God's chosen people. He wages war in dimensions we can't perceive, against enemies we'll never see, to secure a future we can only read about. And the old prophecies say his greatest battle is yet to come. The angel told Daniel that in the final, desperate days of human history, during a time of trouble unlike any the world has ever seen, Michael will once again arise. He will stand up, and his intervention will change everything. Every story you've ever been told, every movie you've ever seen, follows a familiar pattern. A hero, a villain, a battle for the fate of the world. But the greatest war story ever told is one that's been hiding in plain sight. It's a conflict not fought with starships or armies, but for the soul of reality itself. A war that raged in the unseen spiritual realm, with human history as its battlefield. At the center of this ancient struggle stood a king, but not the kind you'd expect. He had no fortress, no treasury, no legions at his command. His plan to win this ultimate war was so radical, so completely upside down, it looked to the entire world like a catastrophic defeat. His strategy was to lose, to surrender, to die. The decisive battle would not take place on a sprawling field, but on a single skull-shaped hill outside a sleeping city. And the fate of everything would hinge on 3 nails and a crown of thorns. Picture the scene. The air is thick with the smell of dust, sweat, and cheap, sour wine. The sky a bruised, angry purple. A relentless sun beats down on a jeering crowd, their voices a chaotic symphony of mockery and hate. This is Golgotha, the place of the skull, and on a rough, splintered cross, the king is being executed. To every witness, to every disciple hiding in the shadows, to the Roman soldiers gambling for his clothes, this is the pathetic end of a failed rebellion. It is shame, humiliation, and agony displayed for all to see. From a purely human perspective, this is rock bottom, the end of the story. But in the unseen realm, something else is happening. This isn't an execution, it's an enthronement. This isn't a failure. It's the central move in a divine chess match that has spanned millennia. The ancient enemy, the shadow that has whispered lies since the dawn of humanity, believes he is witnessing his final victory. He has manipulated politics, stoked religious hatred, and driven fear into the hearts of powerful men to bring this king to this exact moment. He watches as the life drains from the man who called himself the Son of God. He hears the final agonizing cry tear from his throat. It is finished. And the enemy smiles. He has won. He has killed God's chosen one. He has plunged the world into darkness and secured his dominion over humanity forever. Was this really the end? Was this how the great rebellion concluded? With the king, broken and bleeding, mocked by his creation? The earth trembles. The great curtain in the temple is torn in 2 from top to bottom. For 3 hours, darkness consumes the land. It seemed the shadow had finally won. But the king's final words, "It is finished," were not a cry of defeat. They were a declaration of victory. The price had been paid. The mission was accomplished. What happened next is perhaps the most misunderstood, yet most crucial part of the entire story. As his body was laid in a cold, borrowed tomb, sealed behind an impossibly heavy stone, his spirit was not extinguished. It was unleashed. He descended, not into the fiery pit of modern imagination, but into what the ancient world called Sheol, or Hades, the realm of the dead. Ancient Jewish belief described this place, Sheol, as a shadowy waiting room for all souls, righteous and unrighteous alike, cut off from the vibrant life of God. For thousands of years, every human soul, from Adam and Eve to John the Baptist, had gone to this silent waiting place. It was the enemy's great prison, his ultimate trump card. Because no matter how you lived, everyone ended up here. Death was the great equalizer, and the fear of it was the chain he used to enslave humanity. But this time, the soul that entered Sheol was different. He wasn't a captive. He was a conqueror. He didn't arrive in chains, he arrived to break them. Imagine the scene. The King of Life, blazing with divine authority, striding into the capital city of death itself. The gates of Hades could not stand against him. He wasn't there to suffer. He was there to proclaim liberty to the captives. He was there to find Adam, Abraham, Moses, David, all the faithful who had lived their lives trusting in a promise they had never seen fulfilled. He was the fulfillment. He was the living promise they had been waiting for. This was the great jailbreak of history. The harrowing of hell wasn't a journey of torment. It was a raid, a rescue mission of cosmic proportions. He shattered the gates of death from the inside. But back on Earth, the world knew only silence and a sealed stone tomb. 3 days. For 3 days, the world held its breath. The disciples were scattered, their hope shattered. The enemy was celebrating his victory. The powers of heaven were watching, waiting. Then came the dawn. The first hint of light painted the eastern sky as a few grieving women made their way to the tomb, their arms full of spices to properly anoint the body of their fallen leader. They worried about the stone, how they would ever move it. But as they drew near, they saw it. The impossible. The massive stone weighing several tons wasn't just moved. It was thrown aside as if by a great explosion. And the tomb was empty. This is the moment the entire universe pivots. This is the checkmate. The resurrection wasn't just a resuscitation. He didn't just come back from the dead like someone revived by paramedics. He defeated death itself. He walked out of the grave, not as a survivor, but as a victor, holding the very keys to death and Hades in his hand. The enemy's greatest weapon was not only broken, it was now wielded by the king. Sin was the legal charge that gave the enemy his claim on humanity. The cross was the courtroom where that sentence was served, where the debt was paid in full. The resurrection was the verdict, the public declaration that the payment had been accepted. Justice was satisfied, the king was vindicated, death had been swallowed by life. What does it mean for a power so final, so absolute as death, to be defeated? It means that the ultimate fear that haunts every human heart, the fear of endings, of oblivion, of loss, has been answered. It means that the tomb is not a final destination, but a doorway. Have you ever stood before a loss so great it felt like a sealed tomb in your own life? The story of that first Easter morning whispers that no stone is too heavy, no darkness is too final. This victory fundamentally reordered the cosmos. Satan's primary hold on humanity was broken. Think of it like this. The enemy was a tyrant who held the legal deed to a property, humanity, because of a debt that was owed, the debt of sin. On the cross, Christ paid that debt completely. With the resurrection, he foreclosed on the tyrant, evicting him and taking the deed for himself. The enemy is now a squatter. He has no legal right, no legitimate authority. He can still lie, tempt, and destroy, like a defeated general raging on a lost battlefield. But his decisive weapon The power of eternal death has been stripped from him. He is disarmed. The Apostle Paul uses the image of a Roman triumph, a victory parade where a conquering general would publicly shame his captured enemies. He says Christ made a public spectacle of the demonic powers, triumphing over them by the cross. The crucifixion wasn't his shame, it was theirs. It was the very stage on which their ultimate defeat was displayed for all of heaven to see. Out of this victory, the king established a new reality, a new covenant. The old covenant was based on laws written on stone, a system that ultimately only highlighted humanity's inability to be perfect. The new covenant is different. It's a covenant written on the human heart, sealed not with the blood of animals, but with the blood of the King himself. It's not about following rules to earn favor. It's about receiving a free gift of grace from a victorious king. It's an invitation to switch kingdoms, to leave the kingdom of darkness, ruled by the defeated tyrant, and enter the kingdom of light, ruled by the triumphant Son. This new covenant is the foundation for the final phase of the war. The decisive battle is won, but skirmishes continue. The victory secured on the cross is now meant to be lived out in the hearts and lives of those who follow the King. His victory becomes our victory. His power over sin and death becomes our power. The war is not over, but its conclusion is no longer in doubt. The King has won. The question that remains for every single one of us is simple. On which side of that victory will we choose to live? There is a war happening all around you, right now. You can't see it, but you can feel it. You feel it in the sudden wave of anxiety that comes from nowhere. You feel it in the whisper of doubt that tells you you're not good enough, that you'll never measure up. It's the static in the air before a family argument, the strange, cold weight of despair that can settle on a perfectly good day. It's a conflict fought not on soil but in the soul, not with steel but with suggestion. This isn't a war of nations, it's a war for your heart, your mind, and your future. And whether you know it or not, you were born on the front lines. This is the central, shocking claim of the Christian faith, that our reality is layered, and just beneath the surface of our daily lives, our commutes, our coffee runs, our scrolling, a spiritual battle rages. An ancient conflict between light and darkness, hope and despair. But if the enemy is invisible, if the attacks are silent, how are you supposed to fight back? The New Testament provides an answer, and it's not a philosophy or a clever argument. It's an image, a picture of a soldier preparing for battle. It's called the armor of God. Picture this, a Roman legionary, the most effective soldier of the ancient world, standing in the pre-dawn light. The air is cold, smelling of leather and oil. He doesn't just grab a sword and run out the door. His survival depends on a deliberate, methodical process. And this is the exact metaphor the Apostle Paul uses to describe how a believer prepares for the spiritual day. It starts not with a weapon, but with a foundation. The belt of truth. For a Roman soldier, the belt was the core of his equipment. It held his sword, his dagger, and helped distribute the weight of his armor. For the believer, truth isn't just a collection of facts. It is the core of your identity. It's knowing who you are and whose you are. It holds everything else together. In a world of shifting narratives and deep fakes, the belt is your anchor to what is real. Without it, everything else will fall apart. Next, he lifts the heaviest piece, the breastplate of righteousness. This wasn't just a dinner plate of metal. It was a molded, heavy cuirass designed to protect the most vital organs, the heart, the lungs. A strike here is a death blow. Have you ever felt a wound right in your heart? Betrayal, shame, a deep-seated guilt? The breastplate protects that core. It isn't about being perfect. It's about being made right with God through faith. It's a righteousness that isn't earned, but given. It guards your heart not from physical swords, but from the spiritual attacks of accusation and shame that would otherwise kill your spirit. It allows you to stand firm even when your own feelings condemn you. Then, the feet. The soldier straps on his boots, or kalagi. These weren't simple sandals, they were heavy-duty military boots, studded with iron hobnails for traction on any terrain. They were the shoes of the gospel of peace. This sounds strange, doesn't it? Preparing for war by putting on shoes of peace. But a soldier who is constantly slipping and sliding, who has no firm footing, is useless. Peace with God gives you the unshakable stability to stand your ground in the chaos of life. It's the inner calm that allows you to move with purpose and not be thrown off balance by the turmoil of the world around you. You're not just standing still. You are ready to advance, to carry a message of peace into a world at war. Now for the active defenses. In his left hand, the soldier hefts the shield. A massive curved shield called a scutum. It was large enough to protect his entire body. This is the shield of faith. Notice, it's not the shield of certainty. Faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about trust in the one who does. Paul says this shield can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Imagine that. Fiery darts tipped with lies, with fear, with temptation, with despair, all flying at you. Your faith is the shield that meets them mid-air, not just blocking them, but snuffing them out completely. What flaming arrows are coming for you today? That's what the shield is for. It is your active, moment-by-moment trust that God is your defender. Above all, the final piece of protection, the helmet of salvation. A soldier would never enter battle without protecting his head. The mind is the command center. An attack here, a single moment of disorientation, can be fatal. Have you ever felt your own thoughts turn against you, looping in cycles of worry or self-criticism? The helmet guards your mind. It's the constant, abiding knowledge that you are saved, that your ultimate destiny is secure. This assurance protects you from the psychological warfare of the enemy, the lies that you are forgotten, abandoned, or doomed to fail. It keeps your head clear in the fog of war. With every piece of defensive armor in place, the soldier finally takes up his weapon, and there is only one. The sword of the Spirit, which the Bible says is the Word of God. This is the only offensive piece in the entire kit. The Roman sword, the gladius, was a short sword designed for close-quarters combat. It was a personal, intimate weapon. In the same way, the Word of God is not some distant, abstract thing. It is a living, active weapon to be wielded against the lies and deceptions that fuel this spiritual war. It's the truth spoken to counter a lie. It's the promise remembered in a moment of fear. It's how the battle is actively fought and won, not in the clouds, but in the choices and moments of your own life. This soldier, fully armed, is the blueprint for the individual believer. But you were never meant to fight this war alone. An army isn't a single soldier, no matter how well equipped. An army is a unified body, moving with a single purpose. And this is the identity of the church. Not a building on a street corner, not a Sunday morning social club, but the church militant, God's army on earth. Millions upon millions of individual soldiers equipped with the same armor, standing shoulder to shoulder across time and across the globe. A collective of believers fighting not against other people. The scripture is clear. Our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against the spiritual forces of darkness that seek to steal, kill, and destroy. But like any great army, they don't fight without a leader, a champion who stands in the gap when the fighting is fiercest. In the celestial hierarchy, one name rings with the authority of a field marshal. One archangel is known throughout history as the ultimate warrior, the commander of the heavenly hosts, the great prince who stands guard, Michael. His name is a battle cry, Who is like God? He is the one who stood against the dragon in the war in heaven. He is the one identified as the special guardian, the protector of God's people. And that role has not ended. In this ongoing spiritual conflict, Michael is presented not as a distant myth, but as the active, vigilant guardian of the church. He is the general in the field, the commander of angelic legions tasked with the defense of the saints. When the church moves, he is its vanguard. When it is attacked, he is its protector. And he is not alone. This is perhaps the most incredible part of the entire picture. The soldier on the ground is not only armed and part of an army, but is also surrounded by unseen allies. The Bible speaks of angels as ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation. This means you. It's a staggering thought that in your most private struggles, in your loneliest moments, you are flanked by heavenly beings, an invisible host, a celestial special forces unit dispatched as messengers, as protectors, as reinforcements. They are a constant reminder that the battle you are in, while deeply personal, is also part of a cosmic story far bigger than you can imagine. Could it be that the moments of sudden courage, the unexplainable peace in a crisis, the narrow escape from danger, are evidence of a God you never knew you had? So the war is real, the stakes are eternal, but you are not abandoned to it. You are armed, you are part of a vast army, and you are supernaturally supported. The Christian life is not a retreat from the world, but a courageous engagement with it. It is the life of a soldier, a life of discipline, of vigilance, of faith. A struggle, yes, but one where the final victory has already been secured by the ultimate king. Your role is not to win the war, but to fight your personal battle well, to stand firm in the territory you've been given, and to remember always that you do not fight alone. The battle rages on, but the dawn is coming. Every story has an ending. A final chapter where all the threads converge, where every choice, every battle, every whispered promise finally pays its due. For millennia, humanity has looked to the stars, to the sacred texts, to the deepest parts of its own soul, and asked the same question: how does it all end? Not with a whimper, but with a roar that shakes the foundations of reality itself. A moment so profound it was written down 2,000 years ago. An eyewitness account of the future, locked away in the last book of the Christian Bible. A book we call Revelation. The Greek word for revelation is apocalypsis. It doesn't mean destruction, as many believe. It means an unveiling, an uncovering of something that has always been there, just beyond our sight. It's a vision given to a man named John, an exile on the barren island of Patmos. What he saw was not just the end of the world, but the birth of a new one, and it begins with a sound, a gathering storm. Picture this. Not a battlefield of mud and steel, but a valley in the human soul. A place where every ideology, every kingdom, every rebellion against the divine finally gathers for one last stand. The ancient prophets called it Armageddon. This isn't just a war of armies, it's a war of ideas. It's the culmination of every argument, every injustice, every cry for power that has ever echoed through history. The air grows thick, heavy with anticipation. The sun and moon seem to hold their breath, withholding their light. All of creation groans, waiting for the final terrible verdict. It's the ultimate confrontation between two opposing forces, the desire to control and the willingness to serve. The pride that seeks to be its own God, and the humility that bows to a higher one. What if this final war isn't fought with weapons we can see, but with the very essence of truth and deception? From the east and the west, the powers of the age assemble, drawn by a silent, irresistible summons. Their banners are arrogance, their cause is self-worship. They are a manifestation of humanity's oldest temptation, to write its own rules, to define its own reality, to sit on the throne of its own universe. They see a kingdom of light, of grace, of sacrifice, and they despise it. It is a threat to their autonomy. So they gather their strength, a vast sea of defiance, convinced of their own victory. But they have forgotten about the guardians. They have forgotten about the ones who never fell. Out of the blinding empyrean, he descends, not with a whisper, but with the force of a falling star. This is Michael, the Archangel. His name is a question and a battle cry in one who is like God. He is the celestial general, the commander of the heavenly hosts. the one who first stood against the great rebellion at the dawn of time. He is not a gentle cherubic figure from a painting. He is a warrior of pure light, his presence a terror to the forces of darkness. In his hand is no earthly weapon, but the very authority of heaven. He is the divine immune response to the infection of chaos. He does not come to negotiate. He comes to execute a sentence handed down before the first star was born. The prophecies tell of a war in heaven, a cosmic clash that mirrors the one on earth. A great fiery red dragon, the ancient serpent, the one called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He is thrown down and his angels with him. Michael's role is not just to fight, but to cleanse, to cast out the source of the accusation, the voice that whispers despair and rebellion into the heart of creation. Have you ever felt that internal battle, that pull between your better angels and your inner demons? The scriptures portray this on a cosmic scale. This isn't a battle of equals. It is the swift, decisive, and final enforcement of a pre-existing reality. The adversary may have power, but Michael wields authority. And in the end, authority always triumphs over unsanctioned power. Every war you know started on earth, but the first one, the one that truly matters, began in a place of perfect light. It started with a flash, not of an explosion, but of a revelation. The silent, peaceful cosmos was suddenly a battlefield. Picture this, silhouetted against the impossible glare, two figures. One, a being of such pure radiance it hurt to imagine. The other, a growing shadow, a void that seemed to pull the light into itself, twisting it into something else. Have you ever seen a shadow that had a will of its own? Around them, legions of light clashed, not with steel, but with something far more powerful, will and fire. It was a civil war on a cosmic scale, a conflict born from a single corrosive thought, pride. Then a cry thundered through eternity, a challenge that became a name. Who is like God? In the ancient language, this very question, Michael, became the battle cry of heaven. In that instant, the rebellion shattered. The shadow and its followers were broken, their brilliance extinguished. They were cast out, falling like a shower of lightning from a home they could never reclaim. But this fall wasn't the end of their story. It was the beginning of ours, because their new kingdom would be built in the one place they could still wage their war, the shadows of the human heart. Before the first clock ticked, before the first atom was spun into existence, there was a silence, but not an empty silence, not the cold, dead vacuum we imagine in the void of space. Picture instead a silence that was full, a quiet so profound it was a presence. It was the stillness of absolute potential, the calm before the thunder of reality itself. There was no where, for there was no space. There was no when, for time had not yet been born. There was only is a single infinite uncaused reality, not a thing, but the very principle of being itself. How do you describe something that has no beginning, no end, no form, and no limits? You don't, you feel it. A boundless ocean of pure consciousness, aware of its own limitless existence. This is the uncreated, the source from which all things that are created would one day flow. While our universe would be born in fire and fury, this primordial state was one of perfect, unshakable peace. It was not a being in the sense that you and I are beings, finite, contained, and dependent. It was being, the verb, not the noun. The I am that echoed in the non-space before echoes were possible. For millennia, thinkers have tried to name it, the unmoved mover, the first cause, God. But a name is a handle, a way to grab onto something. And this could not be held. It could only be. But the deepest mystery of this infinite reality wasn't its power or its scale. It was that it wasn't alone. Here is where the human mind begins to fray at the edges, where logic gives way to awe. This singular, infinite being existed in a state of perfect, internal community. It is a concept that can short-circuit the brain, but it's the bedrock of everything that is to come. This is the Holy Trinity. It isn't a committee. It isn't three gods. It is one God, one what, in three whos. Picture this. The first who is the Father, the source of it all, the unoriginate origin. Think of the Father not as an old man in the sky, but as a boundless wellspring of life and love, eternally overflowing. He is the anchor of reality, the silent, loving ground from which all divinity springs. His very nature is to give himself away completely, to pour himself out. In this eternal act of self-knowledge and self-giving, the Father beholds himself. And this image, this perfect reflection of who he is so complete, so total, that the reflection is itself a distinct person. This is the Son, the Logos, the Word. He is not created like a painting is made by a painter. He is eternally begotten, like a thought is generated by a mind. You cannot separate the thinker from their thought, nor the Father from his word. The ancient Greek term logos doesn't just mean word, it means the divine reason, the logic, the pattern that underpins the entire cosmos. The Son is the perfect expression of the Father, the divine idea made manifest, the song that the singer has always been singing. He is the visibility of the invisible, the beauty of the source, and the love between them. The love between the Father who gives all and the Son who receives all and gives it back. This love is so real, so powerful, so intensely alive that it too is a distinct person. This is the Holy Spirit, the breath of God, the bond of unity. If the Father is the lover and the Son is the beloved, the Holy Spirit is the love itself. He is the dynamic motion, the fire, the current that flows between them in an endless, joyful exchange. He is not a force or an it. He is the us of God. He proceeds from the Father and the Son, a sigh of perfect contentment, a rush of infinite joy that completes the divine circle. So, within the one God, there is a perfect dance, a symphony of three persons in one being, each eternally pouring themselves into the others. There is no rivalry, no ego, no loneliness. The Father glorifies the Son glorifies the Father, and the Spirit is the glory that flows between them. It's a relationship of such perfect harmony and selfless love that it is, itself, the very definition of heaven. Have you ever felt a moment of pure, selfless connection with another person where you felt completely seen and understood? Theologians say that feeling is a tiny echo, a single stray photon, of the uncreated light that is the inner life of God. This is the pre-cosmic order, an eternal, stable and yet dynamic reality of perfect love. From this state of utter fullness, a thought arises, not a thought born of need or boredom or lack. God needs nothing. This thought is born of superabundance. It is the artist overflowing with beauty who simply must paint. It is the musician, full of a melody, who simply must sing. The thought is this: let us make others. Beings who can share in this joy, beings who can receive this love and in their own unique way, love in return. The divine life, already infinitely rich, willed to become even richer through the free love of creatures who were not God. It was a staggering, audacious idea, an act of pure, unadulterated generosity. The first creation wouldn't be of rock and water and fire. It would be of thought and will and light. Before the first star was kindled, there was a blueprint, a divine architecture for a different kind of reality, a realm of pure spirit. This was the plan for the angelic hierarchies. Imagine a great mind, the mind of God, conceiving not of structures made of matter, but of structures made of consciousness, schematics for souls, a cascade of being flowing directly from the divine throne, each order designed for a specific purpose, a specific way of reflecting God's glory. This wasn't a rigid military command structure, but more like a living ecosystem of light and praise, a great chain of love and service, linking the uncreated to the creation that was to come. This is the theological heart of the story, the fall from grace. It isn't just an ancient myth about winged creatures, it's a profound exploration of free will. The angels were created perfect, but they were not created as puppets. They were given the capacity to choose, and true choice must include the option to choose wrongly, the option to reject love. Lucifer's sin wasn't just disobedience, it was the ultimate act of cosmic narcissism. It was the desire to replace God, to make the self the center of the universe. This is the origin story of evil, not as an equal and opposite force to good, but as a perversion of it, a twisting of it. The name Lucifer, meaning light-bringer, is what he was. The name Satan, meaning the accuser or the adversary, is what he became through his choice. His fall wasn't a tragedy that happened to him. It was the inevitable outcome of a choice he freely made. And what of hell? Our culture paints it with fire and pitchforks, but its true theological horror is far more profound. Hell is not a torture chamber created by a vindictive God. It is the natural consequence of choosing to be permanently separated from Him. It is the ultimate quarantine. God is love, He is life, He is light. To be eternally separated from God by your own choice is to be eternally separated from everything that gives existence meaning. It is a state of total isolation where the ego is the only thing left. Imagine an eternity with nothing but your own rage, your own bitterness, your own unending, unsatisfied pride for company. That is the essence of hell. Not the presence of fire, but the absolute crushing absence of God's love. It is the echo of a door slammed shut from the inside. What could be more terrifying than an eternity of being utterly, completely alone with the worst version of yourself? Back in heaven, the war was over. The discordant noise was gone. But the silence that followed was different from the silence that came before. It was heavier. The symphony was restored, but it was now missing a third of its instruments. For the loyal angels, there was an overwhelming sense of relief, of victory, of righteous joy. The truth had prevailed. The harmony of creation had been defended and preserved. Their love for their Creator was affirmed, deepened by the trial it had just endured. They sang new songs, songs of victory and faithfulness. But underneath the joy, perhaps there was also a note of sorrow, a deep, divine sadness for their lost brothers and sisters, for the beauty that had been corrupted, for the family that was now irrevocably broken. The first wound had been inflicted upon creation. Meanwhile, the defeated felt none of that sorrow. There was only rage, a seething, impotent fury. The rage of a thwarted tyrant, the bitterness of a being who had gambled everything on his own glory and lost. His new name, Satan, the adversary, was now his entire identity. Cast down but not destroyed, his one remaining purpose was born from that rage. If he could not rule heaven, he would seek to corrupt and destroy the one thing the Creator was about, to make next a new world and a new creation made in God's own image. The war in heaven was over, but the war for earth was just about to begin. Before time as we know it had a name, before the first sunrise scarred the dark, there was a war. Not a war of steel and fire, but of light and shadow, of will and worship. A rebellion in the heart of eternity, led by the brightest of all created beings. He lost. Cast out, stripped of glory, he became a wandering king of a broken kingdom, nursing a wound that could never heal, the wound of pride. Defeated, but not destroyed. Humiliated, but not humbled. He was left with nothing but his hatred for the one who had defeated him. And so he waited. He watched. He looked for a new battlefield. And then God gave him one. Picture this. A world without a single broken thing. A planet breathing in perfect rhythm, a symphony of life where every note was in harmony. The air itself hummed with peace, thick with the scent of blossoms that never faded, and earth that had never been stained by blood. This was the Garden of Eden. It wasn't just a place, it was an idea, a living, breathing testament to God's creative joy. And at the heart of it all were his masterpieces, the man and the woman. Adam and Eve. They were more than just flesh and bone. They were walking echoes of the divine, crafted in God's own image. Their relationship with their Creator was as natural as breathing. There was no shame, no fear, no distance. It was pure, unfiltered connection. Every sunset was a shared masterpiece, every conversation a walk among friends. They were the stewards of a perfect world, the children of a loving Father. What could possibly go wrong in a world like that? The defeated Prince of the Air saw this new creation, and his ancient hatred found a new focus. He saw humanity, and he didn't just see a creature. He saw a vulnerability. He saw God's heart, exposed and walking in a garden in the cool of the day. His strategy had to change. A direct assault on the throne of heaven had failed spectacularly. But a proxy war, that was a different matter entirely. He couldn't hurt God directly, but he could wound him by destroying what he loved. He could deface the masterpiece. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about ideology. It was about proving that God's creation was flawed, that these beloved image bearers were just as corruptible as he was. The garden wasn't just a home. It was now the front line in a war that had begun in eternity. And humanity, innocent and unaware, was standing at ground zero. The weapon of choice wouldn't be fire or fury. It would be a whisper, a single, perfectly crafted question. The adversary chose his disguise with brilliant cunning. Not a monster, not a raging beast, but a serpent. The original Hebrew word, nachash, can mean more than just snake. It can imply a shining, mesmerizing creature. This wasn't some common reptile. It was an emissary of fallen light, beautiful and captivating. He approaches the woman, Eve, when she is alone, another calculated move. And he doesn't begin with a command or a threat. He begins with a question designed to plant a seed of poison. Did God really say? It sounds so innocent, doesn't it? Have you ever had a thought start just like that? A little seed of doubt that questions everything you thought was solid. He wasn't just questioning a rule. He was questioning the very character of God. He was subtly suggesting that God was a cosmic killjoy, a withholder of good things, a liar. This is psychological warfare at its most sophisticated. Step 1, isolate the target. Step 2, question the authority's goodness. He makes God's one simple boundary, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, seem like an arbitrary, restrictive cage. He reframes freedom as bondage. Then comes step 3, undermine the truth with a direct contradiction. God had said, "You will surely die." The serpent counters with the first lie ever told on earth. You will not surely die. He presents death, not as a consequence, but as a scare tactic used by a controlling deity. He presents God not as a protector, but as a competitor, afraid that humanity might rise to his level. This is the masterstroke of his argument. He doesn't just promise survival, he promises an upgrade. Your eyes will be opened, he hisses, and you will be like God. He offers divinity. He offers the one thing that he himself had coveted and lost. He was selling the very poison that had led to his own damnation, repackaged as liberation. And Eve, she was listening. The words hung in the perfect air, a dissonant chord in the symphony of Eden. Eve looked at the fruit. Before, it was just a tree, a part of the landscape defined by a single loving boundary. Now, through the serpent's filter, it was transformed. It was good for food, an appeal to the body. It was a delight to the eyes, an appeal to the soul. And it was desirable to make one wise, an appeal to the spirit, a promise of power and self-determination. The lie had done its work. It had created a desire where none existed before. It made God's loving command feel like an oppressive chain. In that moment, Eve stood at a cosmic crossroads. On one side, trust in the word of her Creator. On the other, trust in her own judgment, fueled by the whisper of a liar. Was God holding her back, or was he protecting her from something? She couldn't possibly understand. She reached out her hand. The world held its breath. The leaves on the tree didn't rustle. The birds fell silent. There was a pause, a fracture in time, pregnant with the weight of all that was to come. And then she took it. The skin of the fruit was cool against her warm fingers. She brought it to her lips, and she ate. In that single act of defiance, a universe of possibility collapsed into a single, tragic reality. There was no thunderclap, no bolt of lightning, just a quiet, horrifying internal shift. She gave some to her husband, Adam, who was with her. He didn't argue. He didn't protest. He simply took it, and he ate. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. It was the sound of a connection being severed, the sound of innocence dying. The war was over. The battle for Eden had been lost.